You're listening to Rogue Table Talks. Here's Mike.
And here we are, back again, Mike and Chad, Rogue Table Talks 113, 113.
Your weekly dose.
Your weekly medication, your weekly dose, your weekly, your weekly treatment of weekly dose of biblical truth. We need a phrase of something like, we need a take your medicine, take your biblical truth medicine or something. I don't know. We'll get the marketing department to work on that for a bit. But here we are. We're starting sort of a new emphasis on the church and love one another, honor one another, forgive one another. Bear one another's burdens. This whole idea of being together, the whole one another aspect of the church. And let me start with a team experience that you've been on, or that you coached, or what are some good team experiences and or bad team experiences that you've had in your life?
Well, I have a bad one, but it wasn't my team. But the first example that comes to mind is we were playing flag football. We were all in our 30s, and I mean, weekend warriors, and we play this team that fresh out of high school, and all just thin and muscular and very fast and very athletic, and on just by sights we were going to get steamrolled. But they had a couple mistakes, and then one kid starts yelling at the other kid, and the other guy starts yelling at the quarterback. The quarterback starts yelling. They throw the ball at each other, and they just completely self-destruct, and we destroyed them. I mean, it was like we just completely destroyed them. And I just look at that and I thought, well, you guys could have beat us, but you fought with each other, you didn't help each other, and we just owned it. So it was interesting to watch.
That's sort of a metaphor, isn't it? We might have to refer back to that. That seems like it might relate to some future discussions in this podcast, perhaps. Yeah, you guys could have been good, but you kept throwing the ball at each other.
I was laughing so hard.
Oh, yes. You could have won the game, but you self-destructed. I mean, teams are interesting. It's one of the things that, our kids are growing up, they were involved in different team sports typically. And I just think it's a good experience to be on a number of teams, because you learn. It's stuff like that you learn, it's valuable, life insight stuff to know and to learn and to wrestle with. Because a bunch of what dictates team success is not sort of how it should work on paper, but how people actually work together is huge, right?
Chemistry is huge.
I mean, because whether it's formal teams, when I was a kid, people just teamed up and played basketball or played football or whatever. And you had, you were on teams with people just for that game or something. People would pick sides, so on and so on. And there's just always, there's people that like if you've played team sports, especially if you've played like sort of pickup amateur team sports, there's these characters, like the guy in football who's always open. He comes back to the huddle. Dude, I'm wide open. I'm wide open. I'm wide open. Like every play is wide open. Which, of course, he isn't. And then, the guy who shoots, the chucker, the shooter, the gunner, they go by different names in basketball, where It's a combination of things where sometimes they don't really know how to play, so they don't really know what to do with the ball, and they catch the ball and sort of just panic and then shoot it. And then there's that guy, and then there's the guy who actually thinks he's great, and he's just, I'm just a little off today. I'm 1 for 37. Normally I shoot better than this. And we're like, nope, normally you don't. You do this every game. You just shoot a lot. You think you're great. And
You've got people in mind as you're
yeah,
saying that.
and the people. I mean, there was a guy who years ago was on staff at a mutual staff person with ours. Played basketball, and he sort of played. He wasn't very good, but he played like super hard, and like his name aggressive defense. You know who I'm talking about. His name
he fouled a lot.
And it's just sort of like, dude, it's like life or death. Everything was just life or death, and if it's really life or death, I don't know, practice and get better or something. But there's all this stuff that people's. In fact, I've even heard somebody talking about when when they hire people, they somehow want to find a way to get them in some sort of team sports environment. Hey, let's we're having a staff volleyball or something. Hey, join, just to sort of see like how people respond to that environment, because it's pretty stuff comes out that right you don't always see, right? People get angry, right? And so like I kind of like to start with like what goes into what goes into being a successful team. It's a successful team. Not yet even about team members, but like what makes a successful team and what undermines that. And then maybe we can slide into the church. So what do you think?
I don't know, a successful team usually understands the goal. What is our goal? And we're all on the same page with that. Our goal is to win X amount of games, or our goal is to win the championship. And then they probably realize we have to do this together. This is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. We may have a star player, but that person also has to understand, how does my role fit in on the team? How do we work together to accomplish this? And if I make other people around me better, we're going to be better as a team.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's this real sense of, if I can strengthen the team, we'll be better. It's not about my stats and, whether I look good at the end of the game, even if we lost. It's about, we need to accomplish this as a team.
Yeah. So there's it seems like there's two things you said there that are like what's our goal? And what's my part of that goal, or how do I fit into that goal? I mean, that sounds obvious, but there's all these competing agendas, because for some people the goal is to look good. I want to look good. I want to think I'm a star. I want to score points. I want to get my buckets. I want to score a touchdown. I want my goals are personal rather than team related. And I just, the classic, I think it was Herm Edwards, there was press conference. He was coach of like the New York Jets at the time, football team. And, basically they were talking about, I think like the team actually would have had a better draft position if they would have lost this game or whatever. And they're trying to win the game. And basically some reporter asked him about that. And he says, you play to win the game. And he said it like 3 or 4. You play to win the game. You play to win. It's like he was and it's of course you do. Of course you do. But all sorts of other agendas, get involved. And so what's the goal of the team? And then how do I fit in? And, I sometimes coaching kids, it's like, well, so-and-so takes more shots than anyone else. Well, he's a better shooter. So we all should want that. Like that should be, he shouldn't take less shots than everyone else, because we want to win. And so, your job is maybe to set a pick for him and get him free, and we're going to run a play so he can get a good shot off. And we're not going to only run plays for him, but we're probably going to run more plays for him, because that's how the team wins. And it sounds, in this discussion, when we're talking about an abstract team and an abstract player, it sounds obvious. But bound up in that is I have to acknowledge, yeah, he is a better shooter than I am. First of all, it's not about me. I have to look at it objectively. Yeah, actually, the team does score more points when he takes more shots than I take. And if the goal is to win the game, you're going to play different than if the goal is to look good myself, or to have everyone take the same number of shots, or whatever all their competing agendas might be. And so there's not just a kind of a correct understanding of the team goal, a correct understanding of how I fit into the team, but a correct valuing of I need my teammates. I need my teammates to be successful, because the success is winning. And that's all, kind of elementary. And those are life lessons that, you have to sublimate my own personal agenda for the agenda of the group. That's a valuable lesson, to learn in life. And so, kind of let's slide into the church, which is, in a sense, another sort of team, would be another metaphor for the church. We do have a goal. We have a group identity. We have a role to play within that. We have to value ourselves correctly within that role, and value others, and so on. So in a way, everything we're saying sort of applies to some degree.
That's true. Sports are a really strong metaphor for life. Sports are a strong metaphor for team sports, for a community, family. So
yeah,
there's
a family,
really
a company, a church,
right.
Any group of people. If any group for which there is a group identity, a group goal, and individuals within it, you have to navigate that. We talked a few weeks ago in a different context about, a new command I give you, Jesus says in John 15 in the upper room, to love one another, and that love is going to be sacrificial. But then he also says in the same sort of discourse, like, one of the ways this group, the church, is going to be identified is to be the people who love one another. And that's one another's that we're gonna talk about. And I do think I want to get to the love one another part, but I do think of the one another aspect of it first. Let me read. I thought of 1 Peter 2, where verses 4 and 5, as you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, so as you, the church, come to Christ, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves are like living stones being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So we are each stones, but we're built up together. We're joined with other stones to be this spiritual house. Verses 9 and 10, but you're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellences of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And so our identity, one of our identities, is to be built up together with other living stones, to be a chosen race, so that implies along with other people, a royal priesthood along with other people, a holy nation comprised of other people, a people of God that he owns. So we're sort of God's team, we belong to him. We're God's people. We were not a people before, but now we're God's people. And just like how, I don't know that we think of ourselves in that group identity sort of way. Like, do we think of ourselves as God's people, a part of a team that he owns and is coaching and, to which we have to sublimate our own agendas and so on. Is that how we think of our lives as followers of Christ?
I don't think so. Maybe sometimes we do. Maybe some people do. I I tend to say think there's a lot of forces working against the communal mentality in the West, and we haven't really thought like that for hundreds of years. We tend to think on the individual level, and that is where we don't separate the church from the culture, because the culture has influenced the church, and the church tends to think and teach on an individual level. So we've often reduced Christianity to my private relationship with Jesus, or my personal, which is not bad, but it's usually we don't just mean personal, we mean it's mine and not ours. And Jesus died to save me so I can go to heaven, is how many people would probably recap the Christian story.
Mhm.
Jesus died to save me so I can go to
Mhm.
heaven. Well, it's just incredibly individualistic, and so I just think it's really difficult to think in a communal sense, not simply I'm a part of a community, but uh, my relationship to someone else, uh, their well-being, my well-being is dependent on their well-being. So not just I should be nice to that person, they're on the same team, but if that teammate is injured and they're on the court, we're not going to do great unless we help this person, or if they're struggling, whatever the
Mhm.
appropriate
Mhm.
metaphor is. But I don't think we think like that. If I'm doing fine, I tend to think, well, I'm doing fine, nothing else matters. But
That's my job, right?
that's not life, that's not reality. And I think there's an opportunity here to contrast what is passing for community today in America, just the tribalism, which it's not. I would argue it has a semblance of community, but it's not real community, because it's you have to conform to my ideologies, and therefore if you don't, then you're not a part of my tribe, and the tribe can turn on one member just as quickly as another tribe. And I would argue, I don't think even in the tribes that are have formed think about community in the sense of, if one of us is struggling, we're all struggling. We got to help each other. We got to go forward together. It seems to be a lot more red tape and somewhat violence around what passes for community in the tribalism today. I could be wrong, but that's just my perspective on it.
No, I like that. I mean, there's two things there that you said that sort of, I mean, I'm thinking of it even in terms of the kind of the team analogy. The first one is, that I have, like, if the goal is to win the game, what is the goal of the church? To accomplish the mission of God in the world, to honor God, that necessarily means, if that's my goal, that we accomplish the mission of God in the world, that we become the community of God, that we live out as people of God in the world, then my relationship to you is part of that mission, part of that obligation to me. And I don't think we normally think that way, that, love one another. And I think all of the one another, might fall into that. Like, okay, I have to work on myself being the kind of person who's loving, almost detached from actual people that I'm actually called to love. And so, like, it's almost about, I mean, love one another is almost about me. Am I a person? And there's some aspect of that, yes, I have to be the kind of person who can be loving, but that necessarily involves other people. And some people need me to love them a certain way, than different from another person. And so they're individual people. And the goal of me loving one another, me being a part of a loving one another community, is not to check the box of me being loving so that I can have all of my boxes checked, but it actually is for them and for the body. And I'm identifying with that as a thing so that we can kind of win. Like, that I need to help you, my teammate, accomplish this goal in order for our whole, identity to be lived out. The veteran helping the rookie be better so the team is better, even if it means the veteran plays less. That sort of, trope that we sometimes see in team sports. So there's that, but that requires me to think of my identity and my part of God's mission in this group setting rather than this individual setting. And then the second part is, that we are God's people. So we are brought together by virtue of God bringing us together, not by virtue of, as you said, these little sub tribes we form based on common cultural or political or something identities. And then in that case, then identity in my little group is really dependent on you sort of keeping the same purity of political views or purity of whatever the culture of view is. And if you change your mind, I'm a little worried about Chad. That's the sort of church language sometimes. Then, we're on a team that we didn't pick ourselves to be on, and we didn't get to pick our teammates. That's part of it. And other people, the membership in the team is not conditional on other commonalities. That,
Yeah.
right? Like I have to
I like the
put up with you. What?
well, the purity conversation that you're talking about, I think, is a really good word for it, because we do it in the church as well. So I'm not saying we've figured out healthy community and the rest of the world hasn't. I'm just saying that in its immature stages, community is very concerned about purity and impurity. And if you're like me or unlike me, and it's very ego driven with, I'm only secure if you think the same way I do and talk the same language I do and read the same Christian authors or pastors or whatever. But it is really about purity signaling, like you're in or you're out. And if you listen to those guys, you might be dangerous. But the reality is, in the early church, you had conservative, you had liberal, you had different races, you had gender. And that's why Paul says, in Christ, there's no Greek, there's no Jew, there's no Roman, there's no Scythian, barbarian, male, female, but we're all one. What he's trying to say is, let's grow beyond the level of immaturity, which is necessary for a community to form. But let's be a mature community, realizing the depth and complexity of people that make up the body of Christ is what makes it beautiful. And we do violence to it when we require people to think and act and be or vote like us. I think that's offensive to Christ, the head of the body.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that that says well kind of what I was trying to say, in the sense that God brought us together to be in this group. And it's not just love one another. I don't even get to pick the people that I'm called to love. Like the one another's are the people God brought together. And that is now our common identity. And that overwhelms all other distinctions. So political right, political left, political center, cultural differences, age differences, all of these other differences, those are all, male, female, rich, poor, we have all the same distinctions now. Black, white, brown, all of these the distinctions they had then, they look slightly different now, but it's the same point, that all of those people, we don't become the same, but we are bound together by an identity where all those other identities don't really matter. And unlike, us self-selecting and being around people that are pretty much like us, culturally, politically, theologically, that agree with all these, people, that we're going to be around people who have a completely different view of life, completely different life experience. Those are the one another's that we are called to love and comfort and honor and forgive and so on. And I don't think before we deal with the love and the honor and the forgive, the one another part is the part I think we struggle with the most. Like, we don't get to pick the one another's. And we shouldn't just slide from one local church to another based on one another commonality. Like, oh, I don't feel like I fit into this group of people anymore, I'm going to slide over here. Well, what's the goal? The goal isn't that you feel comfortable in this group of people and fit in culturally. That is not the goal. In fact, that may be against the goal. That may be counter to the goal, right? If you're going to reach this various and diverse community, you probably need to be in a more diverse community and hear other insights and so on. And those are the people, at any rate, you're called to love. And I think we are so free association in our culture in the U.S. Like, we're going to slide from one association to another, and some of that, of course, is fine. I'm all for freedom. If you don't feel like Sam's is doing you right, you can go to Costco and change your membership or whatever. That's all well and good. It's just that's where we have this freedom of choice and freedom of association to move around and say, I don't think this job is where I need to be. But we then just lump the church into the Sam's versus Costco. Like, I don't think these people are not my people. I'm going to go find people more like me. I'm not saying that should never be a part of, but these people not being my people, the question of what's the goal and are we accomplishing the mission of God in the world should be the question that's in the forefront. And I want to join a group of people that's getting after that. But I tend to think we're much more consumeristic when it comes to, these are the sort of people I kind of feel like being around. And you just don't get any of that in the New Testament at all. That they didn't form up that way, right? And I wonder if it's, if you go to China, for instance, or some other place where being a Christian is such a defining thing because it's opposed by the whole culture and all the other differences seem less important. Do we believe, do we think that being a follower of Christ, of being part of his people, is such a defining thing for us, so that do we believe all these other differences really are unimportant? And I'm just not sure we forget that. I think I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. I'm trying to figure out what I think about it. uh, I think we have different options, and we have many different options to choose from. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that uh, plays into, I don't know if how many house churches were in Philippi,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So they're probably not thinking, well, we're going to go down the road. I mean, they actually, now that I say that, I do take that back. Some of the teaching and the problem in Corinth was, I like Apollos, he's a better teacher. I like Paul, he's this. I like Peter. And so I guess I want to say the same divisions that exist now probably did in some way, shape, or form then. So I think there's always that temptation to align myself with what I think is better.
Yeah.
It's like this happens a lot, and I sigh before it because it's always a rub with me. I'm gonna go plant a church, but the reason I'm gonna go plant a church is because I gotta do church right, and we're not gonna do it like that church, like that small old church or that big church or that da 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 church. We're gonna do it right, and I just think that's such a false start. It's such a tricky way to reason to start a church. But there is that sense of, well, you don't like it? I'll just leave. I don't like it. I'll just um, uh, do it my way.
Yeah.
And I think there's always been that option. Thinking of even the Reformation, when you think about Luther and even Erasmus, who's not talked about a lot, they tried to reform from within. They both tried to reform from within, and then finally Luther just couldn't take it anymore. But I think that's maybe my point here is this: I think that's the first option. If you're in a place or a community or a church or a group, and um, you're recognizing maybe you don't fit in that great, or you're different, or the people are different, well, maybe your calling is to help create some diversity there or reform from within until you've completely exhausted those energies in that place, you know.
Yeah, and I just think the scale of evaluation should be to be the people of God, to accomplish the mission of God on the earth. And if you believe I really can't do that here, I need some sort of a change to do that, that's one thing. You know,
Right.
that part seems, because the goal is, you know, to be community, to change people's hearts and minds, to make an impact on the world around us. And if you're in a place that you feel like that can't happen because of whatever is going on in that group, that, you know, to identify with another group, that seems valid because it's all related to accomplishing the goal, you know, living out the identity, in the sense of winning the game. But I do think there's a fine line between, am I doing this for me, or am I doing it for, you know, the big, you know, so I can live out my identity as God's people better. And even the manner of doing it then is different. You know, then if that's the case, I'm doing it with humility. I'm doing it with love. I'm you know, maintaining love for people that I'm less associated with, because that's part of the identity of being God's people. And I think that is something, as we talk about all the one another's in the church, that I think we have to wrestle with, not just loving one another, which might overarch a lot of these things, not just the love part, but do I realize, in a sense, I'm in this one another relationship brought together by God. I don't even have the luxury of, you know, I'm not the general manager of the team. I can't kick everybody else off the team. I'm here, and these are the people that I'm going to be in mission with and love and honor and whatever. And I'm bound to you, and helping you become more loving actually is a part of loving one another, not just me fulfilling, you know, checking the box of love. I think that's I'm struggling with even how to formulate it. Like, I just don't think we think that way. And I think partly it's because there's so many churches in America, there's so many different viewpoints, so many different colors and flavors and varieties that we're sort of forced to choose. And that part's not necessarily bad, but I just think am I getting a good deal here, is kind of how we view things. So I don't know. I'm just trying to, you know, stretch my thinking into, what does that mean for me? What are my obligations to other people? You know, how do we help the team win, if you will, is the question we have. And I think that colors how we look at all of these commands. So we've gone a little later than we have the last few weeks. So I don't know. You have any closing thoughts along those one another lines?
Well, I think it's just kind of practically use different language. How do I make, you know, is there something I can do today to bring a little bit more order into my own life, a little bit more structure, make my life a little bit better, alleviate suffering, blah blah blah. Is there some, and then once you start a little bit of that momentum, is there something I can do to alleviate suffering in somebody else's life? How do I make their day a little bit better? And start to think along the lines of my obligation to the community. I have a role to play, and I have something to do and something to offer. So yeah, no, I think that's right. I think that's good. And I think that if we can just start getting in the mindset of less of what's in it for me and how can I make life around me just a little bit better today. But think about that. Like if you do that for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and you start to get into a habit, then what does life look like in a year? And what type of person have you become? And how has the community, changed because of that?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, I have what obligation do I have? What is my obligation? I just think wrestling with that question is central to understanding the New Testament, because that's an assumption that all of these commands are group commands, and they're being fulfilled together in that setting. And the sense that however I answer that question, the sense that I have an obligation to you is something I think we need to wrestle with, because we're part of God's people together. We're on mission together. As part of God's plan for me, I have an obligation to you that is still there, even if I don't get what I need from you or something. Even if I feel like I'm getting a bad transaction from you or something, I have an obligation. And I think that's, first and foremost, I have an obligation to love. And we are called to love one another. And that means, we're tied together in some way. And so let's leave it there. Let's leave it with this wrestling with it. We'll wrestle over the next little while. And, we might have some different weeks here coming up because of vacations and such. But we're going to be kind of this one another theme we're going to be on for a little bit. We would love to hear from you, RTT at roguetabletalks.com. You can go to roguetabletalks.com and check out our website as well. And catch us on YouTube and subscribe and all of that stuff. But as we go together in this next, the rest of the summer kind of will be like, what does it mean to be one another? And how do we live out our faith and our identity together? So with that, grace and peace.
Thanks for listening to Rogue Table Talks. Be sure you're subscribed to our podcast wherever you listen and on our YouTube channel. Just search Rogue Table Talks.